pushes back on the demonisation of the British Empire. We've got political punditry from Annunciata Rees-Mogg, Emma Burnell and former Tory MP Neil Parish. Can Reform UK influence the next election? I'll be asking tonight's newsmaker Anne Widdicombe. Plus Lady Colin Campbell on the Royals. And in my take at 10, I'll be dealing with the overpaid stars at the BBC. It's time they took a pay cut like the rest of us. We're live from 9.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything, I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit off.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway,
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We've got a brand new lineup every Saturday night on GB News.
From 6 p.m, I'll give you my unique take on the world today.
Then at 7, it's me, Calvin Robinson, with my common sense crusade.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
5 times the opinion. Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
And at 9, of course, it's Mark Dolan Tonight. Brand new Saturday nights on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good evening, I'm Tatiana Sanchez in the GB newsroom. The Health Secretary has urged the Royal College of Nursing to reconsider planned industrial action at the end of the month. In a letter to the union's leader this morning, Steve Barclay said the recent pay offer is fair and reasonable, and the decision to stage a 48-hour strike will put patients at risk. The RCN's General Secretary, Pat Cullen, has criticised the government for refusing to budge on its offer of a 5% pay rise.
Our members neither think it's reasonable or fair. It's a short-term approach that plugs a gap by giving them a one-off, what they've described as a bonus. That's certainly not going to address the fundamental crisis that we've got within our nursing profession or within the NHS.
Labour has vowed to end what it describes as a postcode lottery for GP appointments if it wins the next election. The party says up to 3/4 of patients in some parts of England aren't able to see their doctor of choice, and only half the number of appointments are held face-to-face. Labour's promising to double the number of doctors trained every year to 15,000. Plans to build new smart motorways are being cancelled over safety concerns, cost and low public confidence. The government has confirmed 14 planned projects have been scrapped and existing stretches will be made safer. Campaigners are demanding the return of hard shoulders to existing smart motorways. The British Horse Racing Authority has condemned protesters who delayed the Grand National. 118 people were arrested for disrupting the event yesterday, slightly delaying the start of the race. Activists from Animal Rising are calling for jump racing to be banned after 3 horses died at Aintree, and they've warned further protests will take place this summer. The BHA says it'll be a painstaking analysis to determine what caused the deaths. The head of Sudan's army and paramilitary have agreed to a 3-hour humanitarian pause in fighting. At least 56 civilians have been killed and almost 600 injured as both forces battle for control across the capital, Khartoum. Global leaders have been holding crisis talks to try to bring an end to the conflict. Both sides claim to have taken the airport, presidential palace and state TV, which has since had its transmission cut. Tensions have escalated as political factions negotiate over a proposed transition to civilian rule following a military coup in 2021. And more than 6,000 members of the armed forces will be taking part in the King's coronation next month. Thousands of veterans and NHS workers have also been invited to watch the historic event from a special grandstand in front of Buckingham Palace. The Culture Secretary says it's a mark of the nation's profound gratitude. TV, online, DAB+ radio and on TuneIn. This is GB News. Now it's over to Free Speech Nation.
Elon Musk grapples with the BBC, publishers censor PG Woodhouse, and Rishi Sunak claims that women do not, in fact, have penises. There's loads of bombshells like that tonight. Free Speech Nation, thank you very much. So welcome to Free Speech Nation with me, Andrew Doyle. So on tonight's show, I'm going to be chatting to none other than John Cleese about comedy and creativity. The Monty Python and Fawlty Towers legend will be with us in the studio very, very shortly. And also tonight, the dancer who was forced to resign from her own company is back with a new dancing troupe. This is Rosie Kay, who's going to join us to talk about her fight for freedom of expression. And we're going to be joined by technology journalist Andrew Orlowski to ask the question, is the modern workplace a hive of idleness? Ooh. And I've also got a wonderful studio guest tonight, the comedians Bruce Devlin and Diane Spencer.
Hello.
Welcome both. Diane, you've been making fudge. I saw you handing fudge out to everyone before the show.
I have. I've gone with a Sicilian lemon meringue, biscuit base, white chocolate in the middle. I'll have to bring
You're
some
so
in now.
posh. This is unbelievable.
What? You're the one who went on holiday to Capri,
Yes.
and you're telling me that I'm posh.
Actually, it's Capri. Anyway, so let's get that right. Bruce, how are you this week?
As in sun.
As in Capri Sun, which actually makes it sound a lot cheaper than it is.
I know who you were away with, and they are cheap. I'm fine, thank you. How are you?
I'm OK, you know.
Just OK.
Just OK. Well, we've got John Cleese coming up, which will be fantastic, and lots of brilliant guests tonight. But we also have a wonderful studio audience, and I'd love to get some questions from them. So we're going to start with a question from Lynn. Yes. Hello, Lynn.
Hello. Is Elon Musk now at war with the BBC?
Yeah, so this was a fascinating one this week. So the Twitter owner, of course, Elon Musk, has accused the BBC reporter of lying during an interview. And we actually have a snippet from the interview because it was a bit of a car crash. Let's have a look.
And you just said that if something is slightly sexist, that's hateful content. Does that mean that it should be banned?
Well, you've asked me whether my feed, whether it's got less or more. I'd say it's got slightly more.
That's why I'm asking for examples. Can you name one example?
I honestly don't use. Honestly, I
you
don't.
can't name a single example.
I'll tell you why. Because I don't actually use that for you feed anymore. Because I just don't particularly like it.
But you
and
said
actually, a lot of people are quite similar. I only look at
hang on a second.
my
You said you've seen
following.
more hateful content, but you can't name a single example, not even one.
I'm not sure I've used that feed for the last 3 or 4 weeks. And
well, then how did you see that hateful content?
Because I've been using Twitter since you've taken it over for the last 6 months.
Okay, so then you must have at some point seen for you hateful content. I'm asking for one example.
Right.
And you can't give a single one.
And I'm saying...
Then I say, sir, that you don't know what you're talking about.
I'm cringing quite a lot while I watch that. So the interviewer, James Clayton, there is effectively said to Elon Musk, you know, there's been an increase of hate speech on your platform. I've seen loads of it on my feed. Elon Musk, not unreasonably, says, can you give me an example of what you've seen? And James Clayton has to say, well, I haven't actually seen anything. I haven't been looking at it.
I'm amazed that he went in with this with no receipts to show.
No.
And he's there holding his phone as he's talking to Elon Musk. If it's true, he could literally pick up his phone, switch on his Twitter and go, look.
Right.
But he doesn't.
Well, it feels a bit like he's just following a narrative. There is this narrative, this idea that suddenly Twitter is awash with hate speech. I mean, you're quite hateful on Twitter, to be fair, aren't you, Bruce?
I haven't tweeted in ages, thank you very much. I was a victim for once last night, not the perpetrator. Someone said the Scottish guy on Headliners, is that a wig? I thought, how rude. How rude.
That is definitely hate speech.
That's horrible,
Yes,
isn't it?
absolutely.
Yeah, and someone went, I love him and his wig. So that kind of balances
out,
yeah.
okay. What do you think about it? When you're interviewing someone of this... I mean, you know, you don't make false claims, you know, and if you realise you've made a false claim, you retract it, don't you? You don't dig deeper.
I think if you're going to make a false claim, either go with it properly or say, actually, no, I've made that all up. I mean, I come to work prepared.
Yeah, you do.
I do.
Yeah, you absolutely do.
You wouldn't think it, but, you know, but that was just, it was embarrassing.
It was really
embarrassing. It was like
embarrassing.
Elon had become the journalist, he'd become the interviewer.
Exactly, and that's what's quite interesting about it. But, you know,
Sorry, it should have been done in a Tesla, like James Corden when he's singing. They should have been going around driving.
Of course they should. But
to see how long they got for the charge.
This is why you should be producing these shows.
I think it should be on them. I don't want to be behind the camera.
Listen, we've got another question now from Teresa. Where's Teresa? Hi, Teresa.
Here. Yeah, is the tide turning on J.K. Rowling?
J.K. Rowling, and we've talked a lot about J.K. Rowling on this show, but now we have another reason to, because there's a new series. It's going to be a new television adaptation by Warner Brothers Discovery. But what's different about this is, whereas there's been a lot of sort of hyper reactions to J.K. Rowling, you know, they had that reunion and they didn't invite her and things like this. Well, now she's going to be executive producer on this show. Strikes me as fair enough, Bruce, given that she wrote the thing. you know?
Yeah, I think whatever you think of her, I think you have to let her come along. I mean, I think it's a bit rude that the cast of a thing that she wrote didn't invite her.
Yeah, it is odd, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a bit... But then we were talking about that, weren't we? Can you, if you disagree with her views and what she said, can you disassociate that with your love of her work?
Well, that's the big question, isn't it? But, you know, I would suggest that she hasn't said anything offensive. You know, she's accused of saying transphobic things. I've never seen a single transphobic thing that she said. I don't think that's true. I think that's just a myth that's sort of been built up around her. And she's been demonised, and I think that women who... Or particularly in this case, she spoke openly about her experience of domestic abuse, and she's just had lots of death and rape threats as a result of that. And I just think, you know, I don't think she's the perpetrator here. What do you think, Diane?
No, not at all. And what I find interesting is that J.K. Rowling is a sure bet. Like, you know, making this 10-year Harry Potter series is going to be fantastic. You've got the original creator making this epic 10-year series. So it's going to be great, because there are so many programmes who have tried to emulate Harry Potter, and they've tried to sort of cash in on that sort of teen fantasy, and they've failed. And she is effectively a golden goose.
Yes.
There's a lot of profit in what she does.
I think this will be better than the films, because I have to say the three main actors in the films were terrible, let's be honest. You know, Daniel Radcliffe and Emma Watson, that Grint guy, couldn't really act.
Grint?
Yeah, I think his name was Grint, yeah. So this could be even better at this time. And you're right, Bruce, everyone's entitled to their opinion, and they're entitled to, you know, slag her off, as they have done. But, you know, ultimately... This might be a better show, right?
It might be. Can I just say I've never watched a Harry Potter film.
Really?
Yeah, no, I like living in the real world. That really is just me.
Well, I've watched bits of it, only because my husband was a body double for Voldemort.
What?
Yes, I know.
Oh, the showbiz insight.
Right, so in some of the scenes, when you see the back of Voldemort's head, that's my husband.
I mean, that's quite the name drop. That, you know, body double for Voldemort.
Well, once...
Is that why you married him?
Oh, yeah, of course.
Yeah.
It was the first thing. I was like, the back of his head, that's mine.
Although it's not a nice head.
I love me some cranium.
But Voldemort's head isn't a particularly sexy one, is it?
Oh, shush.
I'm not really into heads.
Don't yuck somebody else's yum, babe.
OK,
no.
oh, sorry. Never heard that phrase.
She wants to lick a skull, leave her alone.
Sorry, Diane, you were halfway through a point.
No, I was just saying that, yeah, so we've seen the bits where sort of you see the back of his head and you go, that's... But, yeah, I think that it will be very interesting. And also, we were talking about the game, weren't we? The Harry Potter game.
Yes.
And that generated sort of a £1 billion of revenue, didn't it?
No, I think it was only about 12 million. But the interesting thing was that only 12 million. So there's two things.
Yeah.
It's HBO Max and HBO that are making it. And I don't know if any Sex and the City fans in. I am one. I was thrown off the tour in New York for no more than the guide, but more of that after the break. That's true, actually. And when they did the prequel, the sequel, whatever, and just like that, have you watched any of that?
No.
Oh, it's a disgrace, and really, it should all be stopped. So it will be interesting to see what actually happens.
Yes.
And someone else snorted. That's fine. It took the pressure off me, and I've just seen myself in the camera and really look like a bear from the woods. The second point I was going to make is gone. I'm sure it'll come back.
Well, you know, that is a very good point. And you're right to mention the game, because, you know, for all these activists who are saying it's over for J.K. Rowling, we all hate her now, her work really does sell. And it sells more than ever. And it was interesting, there were some activists who were buying the game. I saw one that had smashed it up with a hammer and posted it online saying, take that, J.K. Rowling. It's like, she still gets the money.
Yeah, you bought it.
You know, that's not how it works.
But that's the whole thing. Why not donate it to people who could use the game?
Yes, but people are being demonised for playing the game. I mean, it's really insane. You know, but everyone just needs to grow up. Let's just say that. OK, we've got another question now from Mike. Where is Mike? Hi, Mike.
Hi. What's so offensive about P.G. Wodehouse?
Very interesting. So this only broke today. This is the story about, obviously, the great novelist P.G. Wodehouse, created Jeeves and Wooster and the Blandings novels. The publisher has decided to remove and rewrite certain aspects of P.G. Wodehouse's work. This is Penguin Random House. They've added some trigger warnings. They've said that some readers may think the themes and characters are outdated. The thing is, people who read P.G. Wodehouse, I've read many novels by P.G. Wodehouse, I understand that they were written a long time ago and they're set in the past. Believe you me, I've already got that. It's OK. I don't need some sort of school marm to go through the books with a felt-tip pen and cut out the bits that might upset me. What the hell is going on?
What, like redacted stuff in an inquiry?
Yeah.
They're taking out bits and pieces and all that kind of stuff. I just don't think to make... you can't just expunge everything to the history vaults. You know, it was a moment in time. We've hopefully moved on. If if people have been offended by that and not bring it around again. But why, as opposed to focusing on that, let's focus on new writers then.
Right.
Yes.
But, you know, the truth is that P.G. Wodehouse is one of the best prose stylists in the English language. People could benefit from reading his books. You don't mess with the master. Like, it's just masterful prose. And some jumped-up, executive, talentless idiot at Penguin Random House thinks they can go through and improve on these books. Give me a break. It's absolutely pathetic. These people are they're just half-wits. Total half-wits. They're Puritans. They're Puritans masquerading as publishers. They should be in a different job.
Yeah,
they should just be selling fruit at a market or something. Nothing wrong with that, by the way.
But the thing
Organic.
Organic, it would be, wouldn't it?
Where do you stop? Are you going to go back? I mean, they seem to target the racist references because...
racist by our standards, absolutely.
Racist
yes,
by our
yes.
standards, of course. But, OK, well, do we need to change all the misogynistic references that are in all the past history books? Do we need to update Shakespeare? Because, no, we don't talk like that anymore, so maybe we should rewrite every single Shakespeare into modern prose.
This is a very interesting point, Diane, because I think what this reveals is actually the particular pet peeves of the publishers themselves. You know, there are certain books they're not going after. There are certain offensive phrases they're leaving alone because they don't offend them. It's just the things that bother them. If they took a scalpel to the Bible, that wouldn't go down particularly well.
No, because women don't come off very well. We get a lot of grief in the Bible, and we're the only people making bread, as far as I can tell.
Right, exactly. I mean, if they were to say, you know, the moment where it's in the Old Testament where it says that women who menstruate have to isolate themselves and sit in a tent, that I would say that's quite offensive.
How much chocolate is in the tent?
Well, that's the question. What would you say?
They've not gone after Mills and Boons.
No, exactly. Why not?
Well, I have no idea. I've never written for them.
I've never read a Mills and Boon, to be honest.
I did as a child. I remember, actually, my mum finding me reading one and she went mental.
Because they're very erotic, apparently.
Well, see, to let you understand, I was a strange child, I'm a strange adult, that's all fine, and I got one of these high-speed dubbing things, so I used to tape myself reading Mills and Boons and then play it back to myself on high-speed dubbing. And I used to get myself so excited I wouldn't go to bed. And then I hated my mum so much, I had IBS as a child, I used to overdose on Weetabix and do diarrhoea to annoy her.
Now, this actually explains a lot, Bruce. We're going to move on, though, to another question before we delve any deeper into the dark labyrinth that is Bruce Devlin's psyche. This next question is from Leslie. Where's Leslie? Hi, Leslie. Hi.
Should Joe Biden be cautious about who he takes a selfie with?
This is a really interesting question. So Joe Biden, of course, just took a selfie with Jerry Adams, who was, of course, the former, he was a member of the Army Council of the IRA right up until the early 90s, I think. And, of course, this is not necessarily a good look, Bruce.
No, I think Joe Biden should be cautious in general.
Oh, well, he absolutely should, yes.
Absolutely. I just said that a couple of times yesterday. There is a frailty about the man. I do worry about him. But
yes.
I would have thought that his advisors would have kind of pointed him in the direction. You know, big placards. No!
I mean, to be fair, you don't necessarily know who you're getting a selfie with. I've had people come up to me and say, can I have a selfie? And I was like, this could be a serial killer. I don't, you know...
Well, you never know. The clubs we go to, of course, that's the thing. But do you know what I've never understood about a selfie?
Yeah.
Why is it taken by... I thought a selfie was a solo activity, if you catch my drift.
That's true.
Selfies normally with people...
the meanings have changed.
Oh,
it's very confusing.
Honestly.
Jerry Adams, though, is a controversial figure, and recognisably so. So I don't think it can be the case that Joe Biden surely has handlers around him.
Oh, he also knows who Jerry Adams is. They met before in 2017.
That doesn't necessarily mean he knows who he is.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
I mean, like...
That was 6 years ago. We've had a few Christmases since then.
A few Christmases, a pandemic.
But the thing is, he is a divisive figure.
Yes.
He was a member of a terrorist organisation. There's no getting around that.
Yes, and Joe Biden is living some kind of last salute fantasy. He's clearly sort of fearing that he's nearing the end of this mortal coil, so he's decided to return to the homeland.
Yes.
Because obviously he heavily identifies as Irish, and he spent a cursory sort of yes, hello everybody in Northern Ireland, which everybody noticed, and then as fast as he could, he ran over. I mean, fast. He crossed the border into the Republic of Ireland, and the change has been huge.
Yes, of course.
Yeah, and everybody's sort of witnessed this. And it just doesn't look great, which is why you've got people like Arlene Foster saying that he absolutely hates Britain. And
well, it's posing for images like that. It doesn't send a right diplomatic signal. And this is the point. And also mixing up. Didn't he mix up the All Blacks, the rugby team?
Oh my gosh, he did in the black and tans.
With the black and tans.
Awful.
Of course, with the paramilitary supplements during the war. That's not good, is it? No. Anyway, that's all Bruce has got to say on the matter. But listen, we do have to go for a break anyway. So next up on Free Speech Nation, I'm going to be talking to the unparalleled talent that is actor, comedian and screenwriter John Cleese. He's going to be here in the studio talking all things about comedy and creativity. Don't go anywhere.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nah, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel, sort of find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We've got a brand new lineup every Saturday night on GB News.
From 6 p.m, I'll give you my unique take on the world today.
Then at 7, it's me, Calvin Robinson, with my Common Sense Crusade.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
5 times the opinion. Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
And at 9, of course, it's Mark Dolan Tonight. Brand new Saturday nights on GB News, Britain's news channel. On Mark Dolan Tonight, Nigel Biggar, top historian and author of a brand new book which pushes back on the demonisation of the British Empire. We've got political punditry from Annunciata Rees-Mogg, Emma Burnell and former Tory MP Neil Parish. Can Reform UK influence the next election? I'll be asking tonight's newsmaker Anne Widdicombe. Plus Lady Colin Campbell on the Royals. And in my take at 10, I'll be dealing with the overpaid stars at the BBC. It's time they took a pay cut like the rest of us. We're live from 9.
To Free Speech Nation with me, Andrew Doyle. And now the moment we've all been waiting for. Here's a man who doesn't require an introduction. I'm delighted to be joined by the legendary actor, comedian and screenwriter, John Cleese, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us, John.
I'm very happy to be here. And this is the entire audience for tonight,
That's exactly right, yes.
Right.
I think there's some others watching at home, though.
Oh, they do?
Yes,
People
they do.
watch it at home in their own houses.
It's remarkable that
It's just going to catch on, that.
John, I wanted to talk to you about creativity.
Yeah.
Because I read your wonderful book on the subject.
It's good, isn't it?
It is a great little book called Creativity. And I wanted to ask you about it because you make some very interesting points about this that people won't have thought of. I think people think that creativity is the sort of domain of the elite few, just a few kind of artists.
It's just the ability to know how to come up with better ideas. And it doesn't matter what the ideas are. It could be flower arranging, or it could be quantum physics, except you've got to work for 20 years before you're in a state where you can do anything creative. You see what I mean?
You've got to know a few things for that.
But people think creativity, are people born with it? Well, obviously some people are born with more of it. It's like a footballer or a cricketer. Some of them are enormously talented when they start, and some are less talented but work incredibly hard and become as good. But people don't understand that it's just a question of learning, really, and I know this sounds a bit weird, how to work with your unconscious.
Yes.
Because we're all taught that the only thing that matters is the conscious mind. And most of us in education, we're told how to be good at criticizing things and breaking things down and analyzing things. And there's a completely different way of thinking about things, which you're never told about at school.
So when did you first realise that you were, well, not just a creative person, but you were able to harness this ability and apply it?
It was when I got to Cambridge. I mean, I got into Cambridge on science, which I wasn't very interested in. And then I discovered that the people coming up to study science at Cambridge with me were going to be quite interested in science, and I thought that gave them a huge advantage over me. So I thought that I'll move to something else. So I went to law. Now, those are all very what they call left hemisphere, all to do with words and accuracy.
Yes.
And then I joined the Footlights, which was that club that produced Peter Cook and Stephen Fry and Hugh Laurie.
Those are the comedy actor troupe.
Yes, it's a great little club, and we had a little club room, and I discovered I could write things that made people laugh. And suddenly, at the age of 22, I thought, oh, I'm creative. So I watched the process.
Yes.
And what I noticed was, at the evening sometime, I'd write a sketch and I had the usual problem all we comics have, which is the punchline.
Of course.
And you sit there for 45 minutes and go to bed, and then in the morning I'd get up, make a cup of coffee, sit at the desk, and within 90 seconds, you'd have the answer.
This is something you mention in your book. You call it intelligent unconsciousness.
Yes. Because we kind of think the word unconscious is Freudian stuff for all the bad feelings and negative emotions that we sort of put in the dustbin and try and keep the lid on. But actually, you all know that you can drive from your home to your office, that kind of thing, and you're not really driving. Your unconscious is doing it for you. You can think about anything else you like tying a shoelace. You tie a shoelace, you're not thinking about it, you're just handing it over. And people don't realize how helpful and how powerful the unconscious is. There's a wonderful experiment where some psychologists got an audience just like you guys, maybe twice as big, and showed them, well, no, 50% big,
yeah,
and tried to show them Chinese ideograms, you know, Chinese characters. And they showed them, and then they came back a few days later and they said, we're going to show you some more. Some you saw last week, some you've never seen before. We want you to tell us which ones you saw last week. And they were hopeless, like we'd all be. No good at all. I mean, just the same as chance.
Yes.
Then they repeated the experiment, and they showed them Chinese ideograms. And then they said to them the second day, they said, we're going to show you some more. Some you saw last week, some you saw this week. And we just want to tell you which ones you kind of slightly prefer. You look at some of the shapes and you think, I like that shape. And then, not so keen on that shape. And they told them, and the ones that they liked were the ones they'd seen the week before.
So there's an element of familiarity to this.
Well, what I mean is that the unconscious actually knew which ones they'd seen.
Yes.
But if you asked it a direct question, it couldn't tell you directly. It would give you a feeling rather than a verbal answer. Now, the greatest of the Renaissance art critics, Bernard Berenson, he could always tell when a painting was a fake. But he didn't analyze the brushstroke. He used to sit there in front of the painting, and if he started to feel slightly ill, it was a fake.
Right. So it's about trusting your intuition a lot of the time.
Well, it's about understanding how to work with it.
And how does
Because you can only trust it to some extent, Andrew. You can trust it to some extent, but that kind of thinking where you are allowing your unconscious to give you information which doesn't come to you in neat typed out things, it comes from feeling, a certain feeling, that kind of thinking is very important for a certain kind of problem.
So that's very interesting, the idea that you rely on your intuition to a point, but then you apply a kind of discipline to it.
Oh, well, you've got to do that. The critical thinking has to come in at the end. But the trouble is people start thinking critically before they've really developed their idea, and that way you don't get anywhere. So you have to learn how to create a special space where you're free from interruptions, because interruptions are death to any kind of creativity. And you can just sit there for, let's say, an hour and a half, and just let your mind play.
Yes.
Because everything to do with creativity is to do with play, the ability to play.
That's interesting that you mentioned this idea of interruption, because there's actually a sketch from a Monty Python show about the idea of a great creative, Beethoven, in fact, being repeatedly interrupted. I think we might have a clip of this.
Oh, it's one of my favourites. Graham Chapman and I wrote this.
Bloody sugar bowl! You know the sugar bowl! Stop the sugar bowl! I'm trying to finish this thinking tune! Driving me spare! So shut up! Ludwig, have you seen the jam spoon? Stuff the jam spoon! It was in the sugar bowl! Look, get out your old rat bag!
Funny, because we wrote that before I had any of these ideas. Instinctively, I knew how hard it was. You'd be sitting there at my desk, often late at night, because it was quieter and the phone wasn't ringing. And I would be sort of building up this scene in my mind, and the phone would go. You'd answer the phone, put the phone down, and then, where were you?
Yes.
It takes something like, one study said 12 minutes, another study said it's 20 minutes before you're back in the same moment in your mind that you were when you were interrupted. So the time wasted is huge with interruption.
And this is the famous case of Coleridge writing the Kubla Khan, is that he woke up from this fevered opium dream with this complete poem in his mind. A man from Porlock knocks on the door. By the time he gets back, he's only got 54 lines. He can't remember any more. So it's a tragedy lost to literature.
I know, extraordinary, because that man from Porlock.
Just because of that man. And that sketch, I mean, you mentioned that you wrote that with Graham Chapman. And I wonder about whether, when you talk about this idea that instinct needs to be reckoned with...
I don't like this word instinct, you see, because it's got too many connotations.
Right.
But I would rather say something like faster thinking, which is what we're taught in maths. You know, a train leaves Edinburgh at such and such a speed, a train leaves London at such and such a speed, you know, and the distance is at what point do they crash?
Yes.
You know, that kind of thing. You don't need any intuition or creativity. It's purely a matter of logic. So to apply creativity to a problem like that's ridiculous. But if you're trying to think, how do I control, if you're a manager, how do I control this slightly difficult group? You don't solve that by lots and lots of quick, sharp, logical thinking. You have to sit back and sort of absorb it, and that's where you need to create a creative space where you can just sit quietly. And, of course, the first thing you do when you sit down, you shut the door and you say, right, the first thing you think, I should have called Bob.
Right.
And then you thought, and I forgot to buy the cat a birthday present.
Yeah, all those other things.
Oh, and then that book I was supposed to return to. All these things. So it's a little bit like meditation, because you get all these silly little trivial ideas. But if you just sit there, like the Buddhists say, the cloudy water begins to settle. And after about 15, 20 minutes, you start getting ideas, but you've no idea if they're any good.
And does that work with the collaborative process as well? Does that work when you have Graham Chapman in the room or the other Pythons?
Once you learn to trust each other, because when you're being creative, this is a very odd thing you were never taught at school. When you're being creative, there is no such thing as a mistake. Because until you explore it, you have no idea whether it will lead you in an interesting direction or not. And if you start criticizing your stuff before you've just sat there and played with it innocently, not knowing where you're going to, if you start criticizing, the whole thing collapses and you get nowhere. I think it's a disappointment. You must tell me, because did you do English?
Yes, I did. I studied
Well,
English.
you see, I think if you study English and then you start trying to write a novel, you write a sentence, you know, and you suddenly think, well, that's a bit green, actually, I better not do that. And you write another sentence. You see what I mean?
Yes, you end up sounding like all your heroes.
Yeah, that's right.
And imitating.
So you're having all these interruptions, which you're actually creating yourself in your own mind. So that's why you got to get quiet and then let these silly little thoughts settle. I always have a yellow sticky there. So if it says call Andrew, I was call Andrew, and then I can forget about it once I've written it on the sticky, and then let the cloudy water settle, and then just have ideas, and then play, because it doesn't matter how clever or intelligent or well-informed you are. If you can't play, you'll never be creative.
And how long did it take for you, with the other Pythons, to get to a position where you trusted each other and have that freedom to play?
It's a bit like dating. Well, the first time you date, you don't want to say something stupid to you know what I mean?
Yes.
And you've got to get to the point where you're relaxed enough with someone and you feel very comfortable with them. And at that point, you could say anything. Like you and me, we have a very good creative relationship with our show that's coming up, because we just try things.
Yeah.
And we might say something very stupid, but it doesn't matter because it might lead to something very interesting.
Yes, absolutely.
But this play thing is absolutely crucial. And the greatest research ever done was done by an American called McKinnon in the 60s on architects. He was particularly interested in architects. And he went around the creative architects and said, what do you do from the moment you get up in the morning to the moment you go to bed at night? And then he went around the non-creative architects. So he didn't tell them that was why he was talking to them. And he said, what do you do from the morning and you get up in the... And the only difference was two things. One was that the creative architects could play. They could just sit there with ideas and just play. And the other thing, which is interesting and the opposite of everything we believe in our society, is that the creative architects took as long as possible to make up their mind.
Yes.
Because they didn't hold anything up. But when I made, many years ago, I used to make training films. And the best lesson I ever learned is if you have a decision to make, the first question you must ask is always, when does this decision have to be made? And you make it at that point. But you don't make it before, because you may get new information and you may get new ideas. So why hurry the process instead of using all the time you've got for new ideas, new information, you see? But people want to be decisive and they think it's all about this, and it isn't.
Well, when you were writing Life of Brian, for instance, you took yourself away to the Bahamas, I believe,
yes,
with the group.
We did.
And
Barbados, I think.
Oh, Barbados, sorry.
Yeah.
And you were willing to explore
well, it was
those
lovely.
things?
We just talked about the movie for 2 whole weeks.
Didn't rush it?
In what?
You weren't rushing it in that way?
No, we were taking our time. And as Terry Jones said, we weren't having to take the kids to the dentist. You see what I'm saying? We could just sit there with it all the time. And we got the whole script really done in 2 weeks.
And you could say that there must have been so many examples where someone might suggest something. If they were afraid of making mistakes or seeming silly, then nothing would...
You don't get anywhere.
No.
You don't get anywhere at all. And the thing is, if you want out creative ideas in a group, the key is diversity. Because if you get a lot of middle-aged white men sitting in a room on some project, at the end of it, they will all say what a splendid business it was, and they'd love to do it again. They thought it was very worthwhile, and they come up with fuck all.
OK, I'm sorry, John, I'm going to have to apologise if anyone was offended by the phrase.
What, fuck? I didn't know fuck was offensive.
John, I'm afraid it's because it's before the watershed, you see.
What?
It's before the watershed, so...
Before the war.
And it's a Sabbath, John, so really.
We're
going to take a break now. We're going to carry on, though, after the break. We have much more to say. Some of it is Ofcom compliant. I'll see you in a few minutes.
I do apologise.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Free Speech Nation with me, Andrew Doyle. I'd just like to apologise again for the bad language that we had before the break. John, can we...
I apologise. You can slap me on...
Oh, right.
Osteoporosis.
I apologise, John. Anyway, well, if you hadn't sworn, we wouldn't have had to do that. OK, we've brought in our panel here. We have Diane and Bruce, who are listening in on that. And, of course, Dan, you know, you're a stand-up comedian as well. You go through this creative process. Did anything that John say resonate with you?
A lot resonated with me. I thought it was interesting about the leaning into it and sort of letting it wash into you.
Yes,
because I'm always rewriting.
Yes.
Because, obviously, I need to sort of... You know, have I got the right word? Am I writing it in the right order? Did you have any particular habits that you noticed about yourself? Because I will write jokes in the wrong order. And it's only after I've done them for a couple of years, ironically in front of a crowd, that I'll suddenly go, oh, my good grief, that needs to be completely switched round, and then it's twice as good.
Yes. Well, there's about 6 different points in there. One is that the greatest teacher you ever have in comedy is the audience, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because they tell you if it's funny. And as my daughter once said, being a comedian's a bit like being a matador, because the feedback is so immediate.
Yes.
You know?
I've met your daughter? She's lovely.
She's almost as tall as you.
And it makes you so vulnerable, doesn't it? Well, you know, that's why people in their early days of stand-up, because of that immediacy of the reaction. It's not like a drama where they could just sit there in silence and it's fine.
No.
You depend on them.
And also, it's, you know, what we do, trying to make people laugh, is very, very difficult. And when you fail, you feel terrible.
Yeah.
Do you feel terrible, Bruce?
But every day. You've no idea. I'm not happy.
But how do you go about with your creative process? Quite different, because you largely do emceeing rather than written sets, don't you? So that's a different kind of creativity. It's spontaneity, I suppose.
Or schizophrenia, some people might call it. Yeah, no, I don't know. I just turn up. I've never really thought about it.
Right.
You see what I mean? I don't really see that I go through a process or whatever. It's just I do what. Yeah. And I know that sounds really kind of mealy-mouthed.
Do you do much preparation, though?
No.
No.
You please. We're all tired.
You and Eddie Izzard, I hate you guys because you don't do any hard work.
I'm not standing for Labour, so don't hate me.
No. But that's very interesting, because someone like Eddie Izzard, who has that spontaneity...
He goes on,
you know,
as he walks on stage, he doesn't know what he's going to say.
No?
Terrify me.
Yes.
I mean, don't get me wrong, I've got a couple of bits that I trot out, sort of thing, but by and large, it's just like, oh, what now? I'm at work. Like, this is a huge inconvenience.
Yes.
So just have a quick blather with them, and they seem fine.
So what you were talking about, what I call the carpentry, when you've got the idea, but are you getting the phrases right? That seems to me technical. That doesn't seem to be particularly creative. That's something we learn to do as we go along. But the creativity is the idea that before we apply the carpentry.
I totally see what you mean, but equally at the same time, I find that a very particular word will have such a certain rhythmic flavour, and it will suddenly elevate the whole thing. But also,
because sometimes you get a word and you suddenly get a new idea, and that takes you off.
Yes. We actually don't have much time, but I just want to come to you, John, finally about this.
Am I allowed to say the word yet?
No. At 9 o'clock you can let rip. But this show won't be on then. What? So you'll be out in the car park, so you can do it there.
Well, this is most disappointing.
John, I want, before we go, because we don't have much time, just to quickly ask you about the show that we are working on at the moment for this channel. And this is the Dinosaur Hour. And we'll...
People who are determined to stay out of touch.
Yes. So lots of unfashionable people getting together and having interesting conversation.
Well, the idea is, I think the television... I did a programme like this with David Frost in 1966. And, you know, he couldn't get anyone to go on his show because he was sort of associated with That Was the Week That Was and all the satire. And then he had a guy called Ernest Marples, eventually went on the show, and it was a good interview, and the next day the phone rang. Everyone wanted to be on the show. Now, here, everybody's worried, or a lot of the left people are worried, because they say it's a right-wing channel. There's a lot of right-wing programs on it. But what I want to do is to have something that isn't particular one slant or another, and that has people talking to each other, and more important, listening to each other, to see what are the areas. If you take woke, well, a lot of good ideas in woke. Also, in my opinion, a lot of not very good ideas in woke. What are the good ideas? What are the ideas we don't agree with? Why do they not want public debate? What's the reason for that kind of thing? So, and actually talked about it in a nice, relaxed tone. So we sort of created a sort of silly gentleman's club, and sort of soft chairs, and people talking quite closely to each other.
Tell me you'll have cats.
Oh, yes.
Yes!
We will have cats.
I was hoping you'd have
on
cats.
the show, yes.
I would love to.
Oh, yes. But can you bring your cat?
I don't have one.
That, I'm afraid, is all we've got time for.
Buy one if you come on
the discussion has descended into cats.
If you come on the show, will you buy a cat?
Commit to a cat.
All right, I'm going to put my foot down here. That's the end of this section of the show. But next up after the break, we have the dancer who was forced to resign from her own company. That's Rosie Kay. Don't go anywhere.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by headliners on TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Hello, I'm Calvin Robinson. Do not miss my Common Sense Crusade Saturdays at 7 p.m. Join me for some in-depth discussions on faith. Is that not the start of the slippery slope? It's very much so. And the big moral questions of the day. I'm baffled.
You've got some nerve.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation. Dancer and choreographer Rosie Kay was forced to resign from her own dance company in 2021 after she was accused of transphobia by some of her dancers. But now Rosie's back. She's got a new company. She's created a freedom of expression charter and has raised enough money to tour a new production which combines her research in the military and dance. Joining me now, Rosie Kay.
Hello.
Rosie, it's a great pleasure to have you back, and it's fantastic to hear that you've got this new company up and running. Do you want to just tell us very briefly what happened before and why this was necessary?
Very briefly, I invited some dancers back to my house. We got into a debate very late in the morning about the difference between sex and gender. And this escalated. They took out complaints against me, and my board capitulated and investigated me. And in the end, I realised that they were going to try and train me into rethinking my own ideas, and so I felt it was the right thing to do was to resign. But I would have sued them, but they folded the company, so
Right.
I set up my own new company last year.
But don't worry, everyone, cancel culture doesn't exist.
Yeah,
clearly,
right.
You know.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
so this, and especially as an artist, you need to have freedom of thought. And, you know, you weren't being antagonistic or anything, you're just expressing a view and being open to a discussion.
And I think that the arts are the place to, you know, explore all these complicated ideas. And I was discussing making this new work based on Virginia Woolf's Orlando. So, you know, this is these interesting things that are happening at the moment. That's where artists should be. And we should be looking at this and we should be talking about it creatively, mocking it, exploring it, looking at it deeply, asking difficult questions.
Yes.
I absolutely think that's what we should be doing.
Rather than saying there's one point of view that is acceptable and everyone else must shut up.
That's right.
Now, you've created this new dance company, which is fantastic news, and your first project is actually a reworking of a project you worked on back in 2010, I believe, 5 Soldiers.
Yep.
And can you tell us a bit about this show?
Well, it's got quite a strange genesis. I was kind of at the peak of my performing career and I suffered an injury on stage and was told I wouldn't dance again and it would take me a long time to walk again. I was obviously in, like, complete shock. And following the operation, the reconstruction on my knee, I had this very vivid dream that I was lying on a desert battlefield and my leg had been blown off. And it made me question ideas both about the body and the soul, but also, as a dancer, I'd have done anything to get back on stage and perform again. And it was a long time ago, it was the time of the Iraq War, and I looked at the faces of young soldiers killed in Iraq on the news the next morning, and I wondered how on earth do you train and prepare a body that doesn't just risk injury, but you actually risk your life. And maybe it's not like the movies, maybe they're not brainwashed, maybe there's some real excitement in that training, a bit like a dance training can be very, there's lots of thrills as well as lows. So that took me on a journey, and I ended up getting embedded with an all-male infantry battalion. And I spent time training with them and kind of went from being a very scared, nervous observer to a full-blown trained participant fighting against a rival battalion. Wow. And then to kind of change that completely, I then spent time at Headley Court, which is the rehabilitation centre, and the Royal Centre for Defence Medicine. And by that time, the people I'd been training with on Dartmoor and in Salisbury, they were the ones coming back with these, what they were calling complex trauma injuries. So multiple loss of limbs, legs, arms, and soldiers were surviving from injuries that they would have died off, just a few years earlier. That circle, that golden hour was getting so good that the army was then also dealing with this kind of there was going to be another generation of injured soldiers who would come back into civilian life. Yes. So I made a show about this, exploring, like, the making, breaking and putting back together again of soldiers and their bodies, but also a real insight into their personalities.
And where will this be on? It's on this week.
It's on at Norwich Playhouse, and then it tours to Bath Theatre Royal and Blackpool Grand.
And before we finish, because we unfortunately don't have much time, what do you think of the future of the arts in this climate? Where do we go from here?
I think people really have to be getting a bit tired by now, and I think it really is time to start to kind of, like, group together and speak together. I'd like to look at something like a conference that brings people together to look at the law and discrimination. And then I'd like to look at toolkits for venues, how to survive this time, and also for artists, what to do if this happens to you.
Yes, because it's happening to a lot of people, isn't it? And people are feeling like they have to be silent when they need to express.
And that's right. And I seem to be sort of the agony aunt that's kind of like, listening to people, seeing if they've got a really terrible case or not, pointing them in the right direction for legal advice, saying when it maybe should go to the press, talk to them about crowdfunding. I seem to be this advice centre because they know that I've been through it, and you can get through it. We've got to get through this because we're going to lose our best artists.
And you're actually doing something now. You're creating something. You're not sitting there and wallowing. You're getting out there and...
And it was amazing listening to John Cleese, because I've never been more aware of my own creativity again, because I lost it. To be back in the studio, to be trustful, to be playful, it's absolutely essential. I'm having a blast. It's brilliant.
Fantastic. Rosie Kay, thanks so much for joining us. Really appreciate that. Now, please do not go anywhere. There is a lot more to come between now and 9 o'clock. For instance, is the modern workplace a hive of idleness? We're going to be diving into that with technology journalist Andrew Orlowski. And also why the British Library does not need trigger warnings. We've got author and academic Joanna Williams, who's going to be here. She's got a lot to say on the matter. See you very shortly.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the people's channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Co.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like
Absolutely.
on Dubes & Co. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway, Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We've got a brand new lineup every Saturday night on GB News.
From 6 p.m, I'll give you my unique take on the world today.
Then at 7, it's me, Calvin Robinson, with my Common Sense Crusade.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
5 times the opinion. Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
And at 9, of course, it's Mark Dolan Tonight. Brand new Saturday nights on GB News, Britain's news channel.
There's plenty more still to come on Free Speech Nation tonight, including working out why people are being triggered by library books and hearing some more questions from our wonderful studio audience. But first, let's get a news update from Tatiana Sanchez.
Andrew, thank you and good evening. This is the latest from the GB newsroom. The Health Secretary has urged the Royal College of Nursing to reconsider planned industrial action at the end of the month. In a letter to the union's leader this morning, Steve Barclay said the recent pay offer is fair and reasonable, and the decision to stage a 48-hour strike will put patients at risk. The RCN's General Secretary, Pat Cullen, has criticised the government for refusing to budge on its offer of a 5% pay increase.
Our members neither think it's reasonable or fair. It's a short-term approach that plugs a gap by giving them a one-off, what they've described as a bonus. That's certainly not going to address the fundamental crisis that we've got within our nursing profession or within the NHS.
The Labour Party has vowed to end what it describes as a postcode lottery for GP appointments if it wins the next election. The party says up to 3/4 of patients in some parts of England aren't able to see their doctor of choice, and only half the number of appointments are held face-to-face. Labour's promising to double the number of doctors trained every year to 15,000. Plans to build new smart motorways are being cancelled over safety concerns, cost and low public confidence. The government has confirmed 14 planned projects have been scrapped and existing stretches will be made safer. Campaigners are demanding the return of hard shoulders to existing smart motorways. The British Horse Racing Authority has condemned protesters who delayed the Grand National. More than 60 people remain in custody after a total of 118 were arrested for disrupting the event yesterday and slightly delaying the start of the race. Activists from Animal Rising are calling for jump racing to be banned after 3 horses died at Aintree. They've warned further protests will take place this summer. The BHA says it'll be a painstaking analysis to determine what caused the deaths. Over in the US, 4 people have been killed and at least 20 injured in a shooting at a teenager's birthday party in Alabama. The incident took place last night. It's not yet known what led to the shooting. In a statement on Twitter, the governor of Alabama said violent crime has no place in our state, and we're staying closely updated by law enforcement as details emerge. And more than 6,000 members of the armed forces will be taking part in the King's coronation next month. Thousands of veterans and NHS workers have also been invited to watch the historic event from a special grandstand in front of Buckingham Palace. The Culture Secretary says it's a mark of the nation's profound gratitude. TV, online, DAB Plus radio and on TuneIn, this is GB News.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation with me, Andrew Doyle. So let's get some questions now from our viewer emails. Our first questions come in from Amy. Hello, Amy. Amy says, is the Grand National a form of animal cruelty? So we saw that there were over 100 people arrested during the disruption at the Grand National yesterday, and that delayed the start of the race. And also 3 horses, sadly, died during the course of the race. So, Diane, where do you stand on this one?
Well, it was a very interesting event because it caused a lot of flip-flopping because clearly everyone, at first everyone's going, no, why are they interrupting the Grand National? And they got very, very angry. And then suddenly when it actually got to start, the horse falls at the first race and then they erect these privacy screens and everyone says, well, we now know what's happening.
Well, it's not uncommon, though, at the Grand National.
No, it isn't uncommon. I mean, I would think that maybe could we get, like, some of the people who go to run it, like maybe the ladies in the hats have to do a lap.
Well, they have to jump over Beecher's Brook.
I mean, it would be amazing. And you're only allowed to carry your heels after the first 3 fences.
I suspect they wouldn't do it.
After you've broken an ankle.
Well, this is it. So, Bruce, this is difficult. But now, at the start, when there was this delay and all the protesters were there, a lot of the people at the race were sort of complaining and saying, well, look, these protesters don't understand how much we love and care for the horses and all the rest of it. And then, ultimately, there are fatalities. So it's a difficult one.
Yeah, it is. You can be kept very, very well, but then there is a high likelihood that you're going to die. So, is that OK, if you see what I mean?
Well, that's the question, isn't it? Is there a way they could perhaps mitigate this?
Could they not lower the fences?
Right. Exactly.
Could they not do that?
Well, no, that's actually a serious suggestion. Why not have...
I'm sure I spoke to, I can't remember who it was that worked here about, and some of the jumps had been lowered, but obviously you hear about these fatalities all the time, and it's a shame. The horses have done nothing other than apparently enjoy a good life, and then suddenly the price they've got to pay is falling at the first hurdle, which I now understand what that means.
Yes. It's an interesting idiom, that one. Let's move on to another question. I should say, by the way, that there was a statement issued by the British Racing Authority, and they said, our thoughts are with everyone connected to the horses who suffered fatal injuries this week. No one will be more affected than the trainers, owners and stable staff who have provided these horses with first-class care. The BHA and Aintree Racecourse will now analyse the races in painstaking detail, as is the case every year, to help us understand what caused these incidents. OK, well, I think we know what caused the incidents. It's the big high fences that they had to jump over.
What's the analysis then?
Well, that's
we go through this every year.
We do.
I'm going to get a job there and get this sorted.
I think it's up to you, Bruce. Let's move on to another question. This one's coming from Georgia. Georgia has said, is Colleen Nolan a sex pest? Well, that's quite an extreme way of putting it. But Georgia, anyway, this is because of Loose Women this week. They've been slammed for making creepy remarks to Towie star Mark Wright. What's Towie? Does anyone know?
The Only Way is Essex.
That's it. I watch it all the time. And Mark, apparently during this interview, Mark Wright was asked if he could strip off, and this had come from Colleen Nolan. I think it was a joke. What do you think, Bruce?
Yes, I think it was a joke, because when he walked on, Kay Adams, close personal friend, not really actually, we just shop in the same supermarket, Poundland, when he'd come on, she says, oh, is that a hint of a bicep or a tricep or a quadcep? Or, as you can tell, I'm not very... I do turn up, I don't do anything. However... It was Colin that had said, no, what he'd said was that he has no problem with nudity. He doesn't like doing it in front of his mother or his sister. Fair enough. Yeah. Because he was nearly a footballer, I don't know what that actually means, he's no problem going around. And he said, I'm always naked in the gym drying my hair. And Colin Nolan said, where is the gym?
So
I think that was a joke. However, and I love the loose ladies. I am a loose lady. But how would that have been if that was a male panel with a woman?
So there's the question, Diane. Let's reverse the genders here.
Yes.
No, I think it is an interesting question. Now, I saw that and thought it's just a bit of harmless fun. And I think Colleen Nolan hasn't done anything wrong. And I don't know why we're getting upset about it. But then Bruce is put very interesting thought experiment here. What would we do if this guy, Mark, was a woman and they were men?
Yeah, well, you have to just imagine that. So you've got this young woman saying, yes, I like exercising, I like looking, I will get naked at the gym, and then these 4 blokes go, what gym is it?
That does feel more sinister, though, doesn't it? And but But then let's face reality, though. Of course, when it comes to sexual predation, women are far more at risk than men are, and that changes the context, doesn't it?
It changes the context slightly. I mean, my husband watches Loose Women when he's in the gym because it makes the sexism makes him so angry he actually lifts more weights. So we all benefit.
So you're saying this is sexism against men? Is that what you mean?
Some of it can be, because if you reversed it, it's not fair. And if you truly want sort of gender equality, shouldn't people be treating each other the way they want to be treated? But there is a difference, because in terms of sex, broadly speaking, and I mean broadly speaking about sort of the heterosexual experience, forgive my two people here,
The homophobia on this channel is outrageous. I was at the hands of it last night again.
It's out of control.
Oh, it's too much.
The man is always the one who has to infiltrate the woman's body, like literally invade your space.
OK.
And that always happens during sex, when it's a sort of a heterosexual coupling, which is why when a woman sort of makes the cheeky remarks,
yes,
she is trying to envelop him. I don't know.
Am I being sexist by saying that I think it's worse when a man makes a sexist comment to a woman than when a woman says it to a man? Am I being sexist there?
I'm not sure if you are being sexist or not. I mean, you've definitely shown a preference there, haven't you?
Well, it's just that I think that it's more threatening, is what I mean, to a woman.
Well, men are generally, and again, broadly speaking, they're generally bigger and stronger than women.
Yes.
So, yeah, that whole predatory sense comes into play. But does that mean that, therefore, then women have the right to go, go on, get it out?
Well, then, yeah, why don't they? That's the whole thing. I don't think Collins is sex-based at all, you know, and I don't think he is either. I think Collins committed worse crimes. I've seen some of her NTA red carpet looks. Not great. But I just think it was all a bit, but it just is, you know, all a bit of fun and nonsense and all that kind of stuff. But it would be interesting if it was a man that had said that to a lady.
Well, let's move on to another question now. This one came in from John, and John says, are football boots sexist? So on the same sort of theme, this is, well, a group of sports scientists have raised these questions over the lack of provision of football boots designed specifically for women, and how that could be putting women players at an increased risk of injuries. What do you think about this, Diane?
No, I don't think football boots are sexist, but I think this is a brilliant story because it highlights that there's been a progression and that women's sports are at that level now where people are saying, well, no, actually, the equipment that they've got is not suitable specifically for their physiology.
Yes.
And it means that we're getting more money into women's sports. It means that they're getting more sponsorship, they're getting more interest. It's actually a really positive, progressive story.
Yes.
Because it means that the larger sports science community are paying attention to women athletes and saying, how can we really push them into that elite bracket? I love this
That's
story.
an interesting way of thinking, yeah? That's a positive thing.
Yeah,
Positive spin.
Yeah, we were discussing that. I mean, I do think they're sexist against women because women like a nice shoe. And let's face it, football boots are ugly. That's just the bottom line. But it was when you mentioned about a woman's physicality, your arches are a bit higher and all that kind of stuff. So, no, I think it's a good thing as well.
OK, well, we've got one more question for this section. This is from Emma. Was Charles Dickens sexy? Well, this is an interesting question because this is about the BBC's latest adaptation of Great Expectations. The show has been savaged for what they call gratuitous sex scenes and foul language. I don't remember that being in the novel, but it's been a while since I've read it. But despite being panned by some critics, some viewers they love it. They're absolutely loving it. Have you seen any of this one, Diane?
Oh, no, I'm not a big favourite. I'm a bit more of a sci-fi person. But let's just be fair. Wait a minute. It's an adaptation. And when you adapt something, you're allowed to do whatever you like.
You can do what you want, can't you?
You can do Great Expectations with just dogs. Just dogs playing all the different characters. I'd watch that, right?
Yeah.
You could do whatever you like. You can have them doing it on roller skates. It's an adaptation. If you want to make it sexy Dickens, go for it.
Artistic freedom. I mean, there are all sorts of sexy film versions of various stories, aren't there?
And in the theatre, all the time, like, the worst play I think I ever saw was an adaptation of King Lear where they were all dressed in baby rompers and it was set in a nursery. And, oh my God.
I mean, that does sound absolutely terrible.
It was appalling.
Bruce, do you think that artistic freedom goes too far? Do you think people are just being purists when it comes to Dickens?
Possibly, but I remember there was a film that Gwyneth Paltrow, who lost half a day skiing, we have to bear that in mind, she was in, and it was Anne Bancroft, she was Miss Havisham, and that film, it was cinematically beautiful and whatever, and was trashed because of a line between Gwyneth And it was when they were having a horizontal refreshment, if you catch my drift.
Yes.
And she'd said something fairly profane that was unnecessary because we kind of knew what was going on, even if you're not into that side of life. I don't know your arrangements, but, you know, completely up to you. But I just think, you know, you don't necessarily have to sex it up to make it any different. You know, could this have been set in Poundland? Could Dickens have been played by Colleen Nolan? These are the questions.
These are the questions, and we're answering all the important questions tonight on Free Speech Nation. But we've got one more now from Helen. And Helen wants to know what percentage of women have penises. And no, this is because of Rishi Sunak. The Prime Minister has declared that women do not have penises. This is an ongoing row that's been going on. And he was speaking with a Conservative Home website. This was on Thursday. We've had Keir Starmer has weighed in and said that he thinks 99.9% of women haven't got a penis. He used to say 99%, so it's moving in that direction. Why are they This is really silly, isn't it, now at this point?
I have a penis, but it's attached to my husband.
Interesting. Do you think... look, Diane, is there a worry when we have politicians talking about these kind of issues, when they're failing to just say what we all know to be true, that there are two sexes, there's men and there's women, and women don't have penises? That shouldn't be a controversial claim, although I know that one of the Australian news outlets claimed that this was a bold claim by Rishi Sunak, which I thought was hilarious. It's something that every 4-year-old knows.
Well, not necessarily.
Okay.
Not anymore, because education is the Wild West. I think that, I mean, it's very odd because they are the lawmakers, and this is where it becomes tricky. The lawmakers appear to be listening to a very small vocal minority that are on Twitter and are sort of permanently saying this is, and causing all of this furor, causing divide and division. And if the lawmakers start to think that they need to kowtow and sort of bend to this group of people making all this noise, it starts to become very dangerous. No, I'll be honest with you. So if you're going to start eroding what a woman is, they never had a problem with what a woman was when we weren't allowed to do things. When we weren't allowed to vote, you knew exactly what a woman was. When we weren't allowed to drive, you knew exactly what a woman was. But now we've got all these things, we're not sure what a woman is. And now we've got our own sports teams, not sure what a woman is.
Right,
so,
and of course the sports teams were divided by sex initially so that women could.
So that we could fairly compete with each other and we could train hard and we could get trophies and sponsorship and do all those things that we always wanted to do, but we were excluded because we weren't men.
Yeah, so these are important issues then, Bruce.
Listen, all evidence to the contrary, I'm not interested in penises and I don't care if they're attached to a man or a woman.
OK,
it's a no from me.
It's a no from Bruce. Time for one more question, I think. This is from Scott. Scott says, should Meghan be attending the King's coronation? Now, I do find I get a bit sick of all this, because I don't really care whether she goes to the party or not.
No, I don't think she does either.
No.
She's made her money now. She's got what she wanted.
Do you think that's what this has been about?
Yeah, really? She's ruined her family. She's got a husband. She's got her own family. She seems to have plenty of money. And apparently, she's bringing back The Price is Right.
Is that right?
Apparently. Did I don't know if that's a hoax.
You might have dreamt that.
No, I don't. I don't sleep. That's the thing. We're learning a lot about me tonight. No, apparently, Deal or No Deal.
Oh.
She's meant to be bringing back Deal or No Deal.
Oh.
What, here or
no.
Over in America.
No, there's more money in America.
So, look, we can't... The thing is, I just get... But we can't escape her. This news story has been all over the press for weeks. All week, this week. And I'm just thinking... I'm bored.
Well, that is fair enough.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's good that she's not coming because it would be hypocritical if she did. If she did turn up, you can't say, oh, the royal family is terrible. Yes, I will go and sit and do the thing.
Yeah. What I'd read, I can't remember in what publication it was, a lot of people are saying, considering, Charles, I think, had walked her down the aisle and, he'd done a lot to embrace her into the family and all this kind of stuff, that maybe that would be a nice way of trying to healing the rift of washing her dirty linen in public.
I think it's going to be a tricky one, isn't it, at this point, to heal this rift? It's got to be... It's broken now, surely.
Yeah, but equally, if she turns up, is she going to pull focus from the coronation? Because is everybody going to... when they sort of watch their body language and they analyse it and they're trying to sort of listen in to what they're secretly whispering to each other rather than focusing on what Charles is doing.
Right. And that's the important thing. OK, well, still to come. Is the modern workplace a hive of idleness? So we're going to be joined by technology journalist Andrew Orlowski to answer that very question. Don't go anywhere.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything, I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation. Is the modern workplace being hit by an epidemic of bone-idle employees? Economists and policymakers everywhere are agonising over our flat productivity growth. But is our working landscape post-pandemic to blame? Technology journalist Andrew Orlovsky thinks so, and is with me now to tell me more. Andrew, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
So, let's start with this idea of what you call in your article empty labour. This idea of that there are all these jobs, apparently, where people actually aren't doing anything. I mean, you mentioned a Finnish tax auditor who died at his desk.
He died at his desk and he wasn't discovered for 2 days.
And there's 100 people working with him.
Yeah, apparently, and didn't think of checking in. It hasn't got a snappy name. I think a lot of people will recognise it, and there's been an explosion now of jobs where I wouldn't say there's absolutely nothing to do, but you can certainly spin out a lot over a very long time.
Well, that's interesting, isn't it?
And it crosses all kinds of sectors. It will cross the public sector. I mean, everyone makes jokes about bureaucracies and the civil service and quangos, but it's actually large organisations are probably the worst culprits of all.
Well, you talk in your article about this idea of people, they've got so much time, even though they've got full-time jobs, they can actually take on another full-time job or take up hobbies or businesses while they're working.
Well, that's the beauty of having so much personal time at work. You can fill it with, you can do what you like. I mean, I noticed there was a report in the paper today that pedicurists and manicurists are reporting this spike in business during the week in daytime hours, and they're calling it the manager's bonus.
Yes.
That's partly a work from home thing, I think. But I mentioned in my article that some Gen Yers are taking on 3 or 4 jobs at home, and their bosses don't know. They just think they're working for them.
So why has this happened? Why is it the case that, you know, we've all had plenty of jobs where you go in, you work your 9 to 5, you're busy the whole day, and you go home and you think, you know, but this seems like a relatively new thing where you go in and you actually haven't got much to do. And how widespread is it?
Well, it's not studies, so we don't have hard data on how... Another factor why we don't know in detail is because people won't admit it even to friends. You'll see them on a Friday night. How was work? Oh, it was really busy. And you're kind of thinking, what, did you put the blind down?
But is it like a shared secret? In other words, does everyone in these offices know that they're not really working very much? And if someone that started working hard, it would give the game away.
Well, some things are very visible. We now have more human resources employees in Britain.
Yes.
Almost as many, actually, as work in agriculture. That's one very visible manifestation. These departments are huge and they don't have a lot to do. Stanford and Yale now have more administrators than undergraduate students, which is amazing. It's like arriving when a football match has started and there's 15 referees on the pitch.
And there's surely no need for that. I mean, I often hear people at universities complaining that the administrators aren't necessary.
Well, yeah, that's right. I mean, not everyone has this luxury of choice, but I think we've created, it's called a surplus elite, a middle-class elite in a sense, which kind of has this luxury. It's got jobs where, you know, whatever work they do isn't really going to get them into an awful lot of trouble if they slack off.
Yeah, well, one of these industries, I suppose, is the diversity, equity and inclusion industry. And it's often difficult to see how these very well-paid people are doing anything at all other than complaining to people about things.
Well, that's been a great racket. The human resources itself used to be, some of you might remember, 40 years ago, there was a personnel department in an organisation.
Yeah.
And it had 2 people, and they did payroll. They didn't do much else apart from that. But as soon as employers started to let them get into behaviour and mood, they got in through this door called wellness and well-being. There's almost no part of your life that they don't consider their own. It's like a sort of secular police force.
Isn't that odd? And particularly in corporations at the moment. I mean, I think the one example that everyone here will be familiar with is Twitter. Because, of course, Elon Musk has come into Twitter, fired, I think, 2/3 of the employees.
And
as far as I can see, it's running better than ever.
That's right, yes.
So what were they doing?
Well, I don't think they were doing anything at all. And this has become a hot topic now in Silicon Valley, where the large tech companies employed, I don't know, I think they took on 200,000 or 300,000 people. They've let 200,000 or 300,000 go, and it's much like Twitter. Nobody tells any difference. Tech, law, human resources, I think these are the big areas where organisations have sort of just let it go out of control.
And certainly from some of the testimonies of people at Twitter, some of the descriptions, you know, they had lots of sort of leisure activities going on. They had lots of things that they could do. They weren't overworked because that might traumatise people, so you had all that aspect of things. So it is just, I mean, you describe it as idleness in the article. Is it idleness or is it people just getting away with it? You know, because I think most of us, if we could get away with it, we would.
Yeah, but it's also demoralising. I mean, there's only been 2 books really on the subject. One's got this great title of The Living Dead by David Klobuchar, who describes being in the insurance industry and having almost no work to do. And for 2 years, he was just not bothered at all. It's sort of soul-destroying in a way because, you know, it's very hard to motivate yourself when you can't.
But that book's a good example, isn't it? Because he said he worked in insurance for 6 years and he estimates that he did 6 months
of work. 6 months' work, yeah. And there's a recent essay by a guy who's written a very good book on AI debunking a lot of the hype, Emmanuel Maggiore, and he said he worked in tech for 6 years. He's done almost no work. And when he asks for work, it's kind of, don't say that.
So, but this isn't...
You're letting the side down.
People are suggesting that this is great because it means people get away with murder. But actually, like you say, it is demoralising. Not having something to do, not having a sense of purpose.
Yeah.
I mean, that can't be good for an individual employee.
Well, I think it's socially divisive as well. If you have a class of people who do very comfortably, whereas you don't have that choice if you're self-employed or a contractor, and you certainly don't have that choice if you're in a fulfilment warehouse or
it's a different type of job,
call
isn't it?
centre.
Yes, exactly. If you're in a working class job, you don't have that luxury of taking up a second job or a hobby.
That's it. If you pause for 5 seconds, the klaxons go off. If you're in a call centre, you know, a red light appears on Mr. Burns' desk. They're so monitored and so surveilled.
Oh, no. People think that's a joke. I used to work in a call centre, and if you went to the toilet for slightly too long, a light would come on. Someone would question you about your toilet habits.
I mean, I'm old enough to remember the 70s, just about. I was very young boy. In fact, I'm lying. People told me about it. But you had large trade unions there whose main kind of purpose was to make sure as many people did as little as possible. And they were some of them were quite good at creating non-jobs. And that was stamped out. It was sort of, you know, it's just terribly shameful for Britain to have this. practices going on.
Yes.
But it just seems like the middle class have succeeded where the working class movement's failed.
That's interesting, isn't it? Do you think, though, with these sort of revelations, as we've seen at Twitter, the fact that Musk can get rid of most of the workforce and nothing happens, is that going to catch on? Are people going to think, well, OK, well, he did it, and after all, these people are in the business of making money, and this will save them an awful lot?
I think the quality of the people at the top is really poor. I'm not optimistic. And I think as AI and ChatGPT comes in, those people are the first to kind of grab the opportunities to look busy. It's a prop, basically. They're acting at work. The entire working day is a performance. And technology allows them to look busier than they actually are.
But it's interesting, in Johan Hari's book, Stolen Focus, he mentions a study in Australia where one company decides to make it a 4-day working week rather than a 5-day week, but not change the amount of work that they expect people to produce, and it works. And people prefer it. They get it done within a short amount of time, their productivity increases. So maybe is that one solution, or does that tell us that, in fact, a lot of the time people are just spacing things out needlessly?
Yeah, Parkinson's law is called. The work expands to fill the time available. I think it's a great example of it, Andrew.
Yeah, OK. Well, very interesting. We'll see what happens. Thank you very much, Andrew, for joining us today. Really appreciate it. Yeah, it'll be very interesting to see if Elon Musk's tactics will catch on in other corporations. Part of me hopes that they really do. Anyway, still to come, how is it that trigger warnings are creeping into the pages of one of the most inoffensive and some might say dull places on the earth, the library? Come back and join us with Joanna Williams. We're going to discuss that in just a few minutes.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Hello, I'm Calvin Robinson. Do not miss my Common Sense Crusade Saturdays at 7 p.m. Join me for some in-depth discussions on faith. Is that not the start of the slippery slope?
It's very much so.
And the big moral questions of the day.
I'm baffled.
You've got some nerve.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation with me, Andrew Doyle. To work in a library has always been deemed a dull or boring job, so it may surprise you that staff at the British Library are now being offered emotional support to help them cope with workplace trauma. It includes putting trigger warnings on library books deemed insensitive, outdated or controversial. So, to get to the bottom of what all this is about, I'm joined by author and academic Joanna Williams. Joanna, thanks so much for joining me. Can I ask you, this is about a document that the British Library has produced. Well, they produced it last year, they've just published it this week. Can you tell us what this document is and what it tells us?
So this is an anti-racist action plan that the library wants to implement, and it basically involves allowing the public to engage in safe searching of the library database. So rather than inadvertently stumbling across any content that you might find offensive, workers at the British Library, the librarians, are going to be employed to flag up any content that might be considered outdated or racist, or just to express attitudes and beliefs that we don't really are not seen as socially acceptable nowadays, let's say, old-fashioned views.
Now, Joanna, I think a lot of people...
if you spend all you...
A lot of people watching will see the flaw in this, that the British Library is one of the major copyright libraries. It has a copy of every book that is published going back many, many, many centuries, right back to the Magna Carta. And people used to have different attitudes, didn't they?
Absolutely. I mean, this is the most ridiculous suggestion, because where do you start? I mean, the Bible, you wouldn't have anything from the Bible. Nothing from the Old Testament would be allowed to pass through. You could take all the ancient Greek texts. None of those would be able to stand. You know, none of this works at all. Everything is going to have a warning attached to it eventually.
So what is their plan? They're going to attach warnings to all of these various books so that people who are browsing, shall we say, aren't traumatised. Of course, when you go to the British Library, you're not really browsing, are you? You know what you're looking for. But this, well, obviously it's a waste of money, there's that. But also they don't seem very good at their job, because, I mean, last year they applied some kind of warning to Ted Hughes, claiming he was descended from slave owners, and it didn't even turn out to be true.
No, absolutely. So I guess the person who would have a claim to be traumatised in all of that would be the relatives of Ted Hughes, who've discovered this bogus news about their now distant relative. So yeah, the whole thing. But I mean, it's partly it's a waste of time and money. It's offensive to readers. It's insulting to the public that we shouldn't be allowed to make up our own minds about what it is we're reading. But I also do think it's a horrible job to get somebody to do. You know, people are being paid to spend their entire time looking for things to be aggrieved about, to seek out offence. And then extra people are then having to be paid on top of that to offer those people emotional support. I mean, where does that stop? Are you then going to kind of pay for another layer of people to provide emotional support to the emotional support workers? You know, so, this is the logic of this.
Joanna, where does all this come from? I mean, you've written previously a lot about trigger warnings. Where does this trigger warning idea come from, and why is it spread so rapidly through all aspects of society?
No, absolutely. I mean, I think originally it comes from the online world. I mean, people also trace it to things like the cinema, where we've always had age, or for a long time had age ratings on cinema. But I think that's actually something quite different, because it was never to do with offensive content per se. It was to do with sex or violence. That was much more specific, and it was much more about age rather than warning about things you might find offensive. From there, it moved into academia, where it is still so rife. Even just in the news today, it's talking about Exeter University, the Arts and Humanities faculty at Exeter University, giving trigger warnings associated with youth and age. I mean, you know, every person alive has been young at some point and will be old at some point. So quite why youth and age need to have trigger warnings, I mean, truly beggars belief. But it's from academia, where people have become accustomed to it, that I guess people have then gone out into work upon graduation and carried this idea with them.
And it's a real problem, isn't it? It points to an issue of infantilization of students. You know, it's to suggest that students need to be warned about any possible thing that might upset them. I think one university put a warning on Ernest Hemingway's The Old Man and the Sea, saying it contained scenes of graphic fishing. But I would have thought that students can cope with this kind of thing. Otherwise, why are they at university?
Absolutely. I mean, a good name for trigger warnings, I think, in that context is plot spoiler. You know, often you'll find kind of Anna Karenina trigger warning suicide. You know, well, shucks, what's the point of reading this book now? You know, you've kind of given away major chunks of the ending. It's infantilizing, it's insulting, but you know, it comes from this kind of culture of safetyism, where people are perceived as being so emotionally vulnerable to every aspect of society that they need these warnings to kind of wrap them up in cotton wool before they even read books. But I think there's that side of it, but it's also incredibly political as well, and we mustn't and can't get away from that fact. There's other libraries. I've been speaking to a librarian from the University of Leeds who's been involved in putting trigger warnings on an archive. He's been helping to, he's not, but he compiled the archive. Other people are now applying the trigger warnings. He's very cross about this. And he was saying to me just how selective this process is, where the kind of butchering of animals, of livestock, is given trigger warnings, but murder, witchcraft, the occult is not. Do something to humans, that's considered perfectly fine, no need for a trigger warning. Kill a pig or a sheep, you know, you must flag this up. And it's just reflecting the interests, if you like, of the people who are slapping on the warnings.
And can I ask where this leads? Because we had in the news today the story that the publishers of P.G. Wodehouse, Penguin Random House, are rewriting elements of his books because they think it might upset people. Is that the sort of logical development from this, that you're just going to get a bunch of sort of uptight Puritans going through works and changing them for us?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely where it leads. And it also seems to me to lead inevitably to censorship as well. I mean, if you're a university lecturer and you seriously believe these warnings, if you think that letting your students read this book is going to potentially traumatise them, then the very easy step is just not to include that book on the reading list in the first place. So it does seem to me to really be a precursor for censorship.
Do you think there is any pushback from academics and students? Because one of the things that troubles me a little bit is that no one seems to be complaining. I mean, if I were a student and someone was telling me, oh, you mustn't read this because you might get upset, I would tell them where to go.
Well, I would tell them where to go, but it would also make me want to seek out the books and to find exactly what it is that I've been told I shouldn't read. So I really hope there is a bit of that going on. I mean, certainly speaking from my own experience, I've been looking around secondhand shops, charity shops for books with a great deal more enthusiasm than I ever used to in the past. I'm not interested in buying new copies of literature and certainly not buying anything on a kind of e-reader anymore. I want the original kind of 1920s editions, of 1930s editions of Agatha Christie, you know, the 1920s editions of P.G. Wodehouse. You know, I want those original texts, and I really hope it does create a bit more of an appetite for people. This is my hope anyway, the kind of spirit of rebellion. We all go out there and read books published in the past 100 years.
Absolutely fascinating. Joanna Williams, thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you.
So I think Joanna Williams makes a really interesting point. There's going to be a boom in second-hand books, aren't there? Because it's similar with, you get these streaming services cutting out sort of offensive scenes in comedy shows. In fact, it happened to Fawlty Towers. If you watch Fawlty Towers on BBC iPlayer, the episode The Germans has a whole scene removed because it has a scene that people might find offensive. So more and more people are going to have hard copies, digital copies, DVDs, old books. That's the way to deal with it, I suppose.
Well, I suppose so. But what I think is quite interesting is how she pointed out that the trigger warnings that are selected are not only plot spoilers, which I thought was a brilliant point, but also that they are clearly what is affecting the person who's writing the trigger warning. You know, like, so you could have a cookbook, and if the vegetarian is the person who is going to write the trigger warning, so warning, brutalization of cannibalism, meat, and all of this, and if they're a vegan, forget it, there isn't even a cookbook.
Yes.
The cookbook doesn't exist.
What do you think about this, Bruce? I mean, there was another trigger warning applied to Julius Caesar, saying it contained elements of a murder, that there might be a murder in this. I think most people know that, don't they, going in?
Do you know what I would like to know? How many people have complained to constitute this happening?
Well, yes,
how many people have been upset, and how many people's lives have been ruined by reading a book? Because, no, seriously, maybe I am... I don't read myself, but I feel it's a cult, and I want to move away from that. However, my point would be, there is an off switch, metaphorical and literal, with everything, and why can't people employ that across the board?
You see, my guess would be that no one has complained at all. No one really asked for this.
But who comes up with this stuff? Well, is it Colleen Nolan to defend from this backlash?
It could
Colleen,
well
I
be.
love you, honestly, please.
It could well be, but that's a very interesting point. People aren't asking for it, and it's happening anyway.
But that's what I don't understand.
It's also the I mean, cognitive behavioural therapists also say it's the worst thing you can do when someone is actually suffering from trauma is to shield them from any reference to the thing that traumatised them. They say that's the absolute worst thing to do. So it doesn't even have a grounding in scientific research.
But then, did that not go back to, remember I can't remember how many years ago, but all children could, there had to be no race winner in a egg and spoon race or whatever.
Yes.
All children had to achieve the same thing. There are elements of life that's going to make you feel a bit uncomfortable.
Yes, well, it's when they started doing pass the parcel and every layer had a prize. That's when society started going downhill. From that point on. Anyway, that's enough for this. I think we've covered this pretty well. But after the break, we're going to be going through our social sensations, the various things that have gone viral this week, just in case you missed them. So don't go anywhere for a few minutes' time.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Co.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit off.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you.
She's only teasing. Go on.
He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Co.
Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway, Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We've got a brand new lineup every Saturday night on GB News.
From 6 p.m, I'll give you my unique take on the world today.
Then at 7, it's me, Calvin Robinson, with my Common Sense Crusade.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
5 times the opinion. Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
And at 9, of course, it's Mark Dolan Tonight. Brand new Saturday nights on GB News, Britain's news channel. On Mark Dolan Tonight, Nigel Biggar, top historian and author of a brand new book which pushes back on the demonisation of the British Empire. We've got political punditry from Annunciata Rees-Mogg, Emma Burnell and former Tory MP Neil Parish. Can Reform UK influence the next election? I'll be asking tonight's newsmaker Anne Widdicombe. Plus Lady Colin Campbell on the Royals. And in my take at 10, I'll be dealing with the overpaid stars at the BBC. It's time they took a pay cut like the rest of us. We're live from 9.
Free Speech Nation. So every week we dedicate this part of the show to the world of social media, those things that have gone viral. So we're going to start with this one. This is about the trans ballet dancer from the Royal Ballet, and there was an interesting clip of, let's have a look anyway, you'll see what I mean, of the trans dancer and a young woman doing the same routine. Can we see this clip? Now, a lot of people have used this to sort of say it's really unfair that this person has passed this exam when other women haven't. But actually, that's slight misreporting. This wasn't the case. It wasn't someone getting into a school. It was someone as a hobby taking an exam, and that seems reasonable to me. But it's quite clear that, you know, the woman is better at it, the young girl. What do you think?
Oh yeah, but we're now comparing two people dancing.
Yes.
Like, so I don't see it as sort of a gender issue. I see it as just because it's a hobby.
Yes.
And it's two people just sort of dancing.
Yeah, it was a bit unfair, I thought, the way that this was sort of, people were sort of piling on saying, oh, isn't it outrageous that this person could pass an exam? Clearly not as good, but it doesn't really do anyone that much harm, does it?
What was the exam for?
It was for a ballet exam run by the Royal Academy, but it was represented as coming into the, you know, part of the troupe, and that really wasn't what it was, you know?
Right.
But
I really don't know what you want me to say, Andrew. The whole thing has thrown me, unfortunately.
I thought you were quite an aficionado when it comes to ballet.
I'd like a dance. Genuinely, I do. For a man of my size, I move very well.
I'm sure you do.
But, yeah, no, I don't see the problem. I say if people want to dance and pass an exam, I think there's worse things going on in the world.
I think there probably is. Anyway, look, next up, we've got this one. This is the writer and non-binary model, Jamie Windust, talking about pride. Now, this is...
There's celebration there, but I think what predominantly tends to happen is it's cis white gay men and their cis white female friends just kind of having fun, but not really thinking about how that might feel for other people in that space.
So this is a very odd one. So complaining that basically pride parades are too many white people, too many gay people. I mean, and everyone's having fun. Is that a problem, Bruce?
Was the first thing about dancing, because I'd like to go back to that. I don't know who this person... do you know what I do understand from the point of some of my gay friends? So, for example, a friend of mine, Glenn, who lives in Brighton, had said a friend of his, there is a point to this, there was an excitable hen night, and one of them bit into his mate.
What?
Right? Now, I don't know why, but they bit into his mate. And I think a lot of gay people are like, OK, we don't really have as many places that we can go and we can feel safe.
Yes.
And when they're being infiltrated by people that are maybe coming in to bite you or whatever. But I think if people at a pride parade are having too much fun, I would have thought that would have been part of the message of Pride, to have fun, to acknowledge there are still struggles within the community.
Clearly.
But you're not allowed to have a laugh.
But that's not what this guy's saying. Like, he's basically... I think this...
Have I got this wrong?
Well, it's the extent of identity politics has got to the point where people are now saying there are too many white people at this event, too many gay people at this event. And you know, I think it's kind of just gone a bit too far, hasn't it?
Well, it seems a little strange because the Pride event, let's take that event specifically, is about sort of saying, no, there are gay people. Gay people exist. They've had a lot of struggle and they want to be there and say, no, we're here. But, like... Why do you not want people to support your cause?
Well, I think it's people just like to problematise things and say that everything is an issue.
But then, is any Pride organiser over the world now going to have to do some kind of demographic kind of totalling to please certain people? I don't know.
Makes no sense. Anyway, this tweet went viral this week. I thought this was quite interesting. And this was a tweet, and it said, our 6-year-old handed us a note. His teacher had called my wife and I in for an emergency meeting. We asked our son if he had any idea why. He said, she didn't like a drawing I did. Now, you can see the drawing of the family there. Could potentially look disturbing. We went in the next day. His teacher pulled the drawing below out and said, I asked him to draw his family and he drew this. Would you mind explaining? Not at all, my wife said. Family vacation, snorkeling off the Bahamas. But I suppose, you know, when I was a teacher, I think if I'd have got that, I might have called the parents in, I think it's a reasonable misunderstanding. I think the child just isn't very good at art.
Do you know, I love the fact it couldn't be any more of a Waitrose answer. Snorkeling. It's It's just got Joan Collins written all over it, doesn't it? Yeah, I mean, I can see with the picture why you might... I thought they all kind of looked like the Eiffel Tower. I thought they'd maybe been to France or whatever. But clearly not. They've been snorkelling.
They've just been snorkelling.
Well,
I feel sorry for the kid.
What a lucky child. Can't Robert has lovely holidays.
What do you think of this, Diane?
I think it's hilarious because my sister, when she was younger, bless her, she drew a picture of fireworks night, and she drew all the rockets, but she drew them on the floor as well as in the sky. But the way that she drew the rockets was in one swift motion, and it looked like, I'll be honest, a field of phalluses. And when she sort of brought it out, and they were all glittery, and it looked fabulous, but at the same time, I went...
Now, you call social services at that point, don't you?
Like, well, what are these? And she went, well, they're the rockets. Right, yes.
Yes. It's a minefield, I tell you. Anyway, this is the last part of the show where we talk through your unfiltered dilemmas. So thanks very much. You often send in your problems. This dilemma came in from Tracy. Tracy has said, my partner has always been in good shape, but recently he's gained a lot of weight. I don't mind a dad bod, but we are getting married soon, and I don't want to marry a fat husband. Do I tell him he's too fat? This is outrageous, Tracy. You're fat-shaming your partner. Diane, any thoughts?
Well...
Diane's actually horrified by this.
Tracy seems very callous.
Well, I wouldn't marry Tracy. I think that's the answer to this one.
First of all, what does Tracy look like? How many biscuits has Tracy had recently? That's the question we're asking. Now, I speak as someone that was 21 stone last year. I'm down to 16. I've got 2 stone to go. No. You must never clap for weight loss now. Apparently, it's a bad thing. I learned that on a podcast during the Fringe from someone that had a stomach gastric sleeve. But anyway, we'll move on. My point is that apparently you're not allowed to say the word fat. So, long short, Lorraine Kelly got me a deal with a diet company, right? No names. And because I don't think we're allowed to advertise. And I remember being on a Zoom with these people that did the diet, and they were like, it's amazing you said the word fat, because you're not allowed to say the word fat anymore. If you're a man and you want to be body positive, you have to say rugby build or thick. And with a woman, it's plus size, voluptuous.
On that note, I'm going to have to put an end to this.
Tracy, put those biscuits away.
Thanks so much for joining us for Free Speech Nation. This was the week when Elon Musk took the bee to the cleaners. We discovered that Charles Dickens was in fact sexy, and the Prime Minister confirmed that women do not have penises. Thanks for that, Rishi. And thank you to my panel, Bruce and Diane, to all my wonderful guests. And if, by the way, you want to join us live in the studio, be part of our wonderful audience, you can do that. Just go to www.sroaudiences.com. That's on the screen right now. And come along and stay tuned tonight for the brilliant Mark Dolan tonight. That's on next. And don't forget that Headliners is on at 11 p.m. That's the late night paper preview show. See you next week.
Hello there, I'm Craig Snell. Here is your latest forecast on the Met Office. Well, as we go through the week ahead, it is set to be largely dry and settled for a lot of the country. Feeling quite warm in the sunshine, but if you do live along the North Sea, it's going to be pretty chilly at times. So here's the situation at the moment. We've got high pressure beginning to build in across the country. It's allowing these weather fronts to gradually weaken, but it is going to leave behind quite a lot of cloud overnight. So for a lot of the country, quite an overcast night, some spits and spots of rain at times too, and across England and Wales, it could turn quite misty and murky, especially across the high ground. So just be a bit wary of that as we go through the course of the night. Clearest of the skies up across northern Scotland, where here we could just see a touch of frost. So for most of us, it's going to be a bit of a grey, damp start to the new working week. Some spits and spots of rain in places. Sunshine from the word go, though, for parts of northern Scotland, and it does improve for Northern Ireland throughout the morning, and then eventually into parts of Lincolnshire, East Anglia and the south east of England as we go through the course of the afternoon. So where we do see the sunshine, feeling quite warm, temperatures reaching 17, 18, possibly 19 degrees. And then that sunshine will spread its way a little bit further into the Midlands as we go into the evening. So some late sunshine here, but the further west you are, hanging on to the cloud for the majority of Monday evening. And then overnight, really a mixture of cloud and clear spells across the country. Cloud, again, thick enough at times, especially across Scotland, to produce a few spits and spots of rain. And again, quite murky across some high ground of England and Wales. Temperatures falling to around 5 to 6 degrees for most towns and cities. So then on Tuesday, a bit of a grey, murky start again across some central parts of the country, but the sunshine will quickly get to work on that cloud on Tuesday. So plenty of sunshine as we go into the afternoon, and in the sunshine feeling pleasantly warm, although as I mentioned, in the North Sea, it will feel pretty chilly if you are living along that coastline. Wednesday, Thursday, pretty similar, although a risk of a shower in the south.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.